That's the big one for Magnus Carlsen, the greatest player of all time, starting with the white pieces. It is going to be the Queen's Pawn opening, and perhaps we're going to see another Queen's Gambit decline, something we saw in the match between Hikaru Nakamura in our first match of Group B right there. And it is a very similar structure, except Magnus decides to fianchetto his bishop.
That's right. This is the Catalan opening, a branch of the Queen's Gambit declined. We see a pawn captured, and it's clung onto, at least temporarily, by Andrey Esipenko. Still mainline theory. Magnus showing his respect, about to win the pawn back to Esipenko here. Magnus tends to only play this opening in World Championship matches or huge games. So Mike Klein was predicting maybe something offbeat. Magnus has actually surprised us all, surprised his opponent by going straight for the main line.
And it's something we saw in his 2021 World Championship match against Jan Nepomniachtchi. Magnus Carlsen, the Catalan, was such a big opening right there. And we do see a very interesting approach by Esipenko with the black pieces. It looks like he's prepared a little surprise in the Catalan for the world number one.
That's right. This pawn sacrifice for black, being a pawn up just a few moves ago, about to be a pawn down. This became very trendy a few years ago. It's known as a neutralizing attempt. Esipenko moving his bishop now into the center. Essentially, you kick the white queen around so many times. White has an isolated pawn on the left flank. White has several pieces still asleep, while black gains momentum, gains a bit of an initiative with the active pieces. Ultimately, you're not playing for more than a draw with black, unless white takes big risks.
A draw for Esipenko in game one will be a fantastic result, a fantastic way to start the group stage. I'm going to point out the key idea for Esipenko in this position. It is around getting rid of your own C weakness, and he does it instantly with a break at the center, forcing an eventual trade, which will leave Magnus with a weak isolated pawn on the left flank.
Exactly, and the one thing that is for certain after this opening is that Esipenko needs to know what he's doing. Otherwise, you're just a pawn down against the greatest player of all time, no real compensation. Here, for now at least, white's pieces are pretty passive. That white queen, not on a happy square, has been forced back to the back rank. Magnus is essentially saying, the hard work is done, I've won a pawn, I just need to survive the next few moves. Can Andrey Esipenko continue with the energetic play, continue maybe jumping his knights forward into the white half of the board, maybe get the black queen out of the way, connect the rooks? Still great compensation, but you need to justify this long-term, not just over the next few moves.
And he does it coming in with a big threat, a fork in the air that you have to watch out with the knight jumping forward by Andrey Esipenko right now. He's keeping the activity, he's keeping the momentum going in the position. You have to fight for that dynamic right now. Beautifully placed pieces. Compare every single piece that Esipenko has to Magnus's counterpart, and you can see the compensation for yourself.
Exactly, especially those naughty knights for black getting ready to jump in. Magnus would love to trade off more pieces. That's how to convert the advantage long term. Just trade off the knights, all the bishops, everything. Just be left with an extra pawn. But a lot of hard work here for Magnus. He needs to ensure he doesn't allow those knights to jump with devastating threats.
The one thing the elite in chess have learned by playing against Magnus Carlsen is that if you want a good result against the world number one, you need to draw him into early complications. You need to make it a messy battle on the board. No chances when it's a positional strategic fight. So I think well done on Esipenko finding those complex middle games.
Exactly. Often you want to keep the queens on as well, because Magnus is a god when it comes to end games. So while the queens remain on, Andrey Esipenko maybe feeling pretty confident. Magnus gets the queen out of the way. Now the white rook can actually move. Not just that, but forks have been neutralized there. How to continue? Andrey Esipenko, he's ahead on time here by almost a minute. If he can keep that up, somehow keep the pieces active, he should be fine. But Magnus, I think this is just Magnus 2.0, 3.0, whatever iteration it is of Magnus these days. With white, tries to play a little less risky. He knows that worst comes to worst, white should be able to give back the pawn with an equal position.
Yes, but with the white pieces, how much of an equal position you want? I think Magnus wants to push this out. He wants to grind out a win in the first one here. Because, David, the next game, it will be Andrey playing with the white pieces. And if he gets a chance, he's going to try to create more complicated battles on the board right now. Queen C1, and it is the longest thing we've seen by Esipenko. Looks like he's out of that opening preparation. How do you get that rook next to the black king into the game is the next question for black.
Exactly. First, he centralizes his knight, maybe angling for the bishop pair. That would grant some compensation since the board is pretty open right now. He's trying to eliminate white's dart squared bishop. After that, it will be the priority to get the black rook into the game. White's rook entering the action is a very likely move in the near future for Magnus. Maybe you could develop a knight as well. Still a lot of options for both sides. That's why they're spending the time. And it feels like, Tanya, loads of early simplifications. The whole queen side, pretty much the whole left side of the board, just totally obliterated early, meaning that the players do have that luxury of time. This game is hurtling towards the latter stages, so they can afford to have those longer things.
And now a question for Esipenko. If you trade either one of your knights for what Magnus has just played, you do allow a better pawn formation for the white pieces. But if not, is there even a good way to avoid that? And Esipenko needs to take that decision quickly. You could be looking at ideas of capturing the knight, bringing the queen out to that left flank, coming in with momentum, with threats on that c3 square.
Yeah, it has to be a trade here. It has to be an exchange of some type of minor pieces. That is pretty much guaranteed. So you have to choose. Do you take white's bishop here? Do you take white's knight? Tanya, you're mentioning that there could be a trade of knights potentially. The black queen now arriving with gain of time, gain of tempo, because there would be a hit on white's extra pawn. Surprisingly hard to defend this. Maybe you have to move it forward. But here, the black knight could continue jumping, for example, with some threats, and black is still active. The option, if we go back to the live position, is to play maybe longer term rather than the short-term threats, to take the bishop off the board, to say, okay, knights can come off too, but when the dust settles, I'm going to bring my bishop to an active line. Bishop's on the long diagonals, and okay, he goes for the first option. He's going active, Andrey Esipenko. It's the queen that enters the fray.
You just can't give Magnus enough time to consolidate, bring his pieces out down a pawn. So he's coming in with a threat, with an idea on every move. Is Andrey Esipenko, battle-tested from yesterday, facing elimination in 4 matches, winning each one of them to make it to today. And he needs to use that momentum. You know, he's played under the pressure of elimination, under this stage. He's experienced it all. For Magnus, he's really fresh. Catch him before he finds his rhythm.
Exactly. Esipenko, it would be easy to be exhausted after yesterday's action, really close to elimination. But on the bright side, he was able to survive what almost looked like hopeless situations. If he can survive that, he'll believe maybe he can survive against Magnus too. The pawn does advance as we predicted. Pretty much the only way for Magnus to keep his material advantage. And now Esipenko needs to decide, is it time to shuffle the rook towards the center? The black rook can finally enter the action, or does he continue searching for tactics, jumping in with his pieces?
I'll tell you the one thing Esipenko needs to avoid. Magnus has set up the idea of putting his queen on that left corner square, offering a trade. Any endgame, we just know what a magician Magnus is in those. So avoid the queen trades. Do not give him that one move to offer it or to take full control of the A-line. Queen to A1 is what Magnus wants next.
Queen to A1, black will have no fun. That is for sure. Magnus will have an advantage. Extra pawn in the endgame. So maybe that window of opportunity is closing. Esipenko not happy. We saw on the camera there, struggling to find a move. He knows that queen to A1 is coming. Can he find any tactics to slow Magnus down? If he's a bit too passive over the next couple of moves, it could just be over. Magnus could just be trying to convert a very one-sided endgame.
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword right there, right? You go into these complications, but you need to be so incredibly precise against Magnus. You give him one opportunity and he's all over your back, giving you no space to breathe. The rook does come into the game, X-raying that C4 pawn that Magnus has. It requires calculation. Are you in time to still go for that queen trade? There are pieces hanging for those pawns hanging.
And there we go. Great spot, Tanya. The white queen does land in the corner. Normally not advisable, but here with a clear motif. It wants to eliminate the more active black queen. That trade would definitely suit Magnus right now. And suddenly, if the black queen wants to stay on the board, it has to retreat to a slightly awkward square. Magnus has got everything controlled. The black bishop, the light square bishop on the A8 square in the corner, also slightly vulnerable to some tactics. And just to show that, for example, after a queen trade, black can trade off some pawns in the center too, but no time to regain the pawn here. If you take it, then the black bishop drops off with a deadly check. Tanya, it does look like Magnus is going to keep the advantage, and now it's his favorite phase of the game, the endgame.
That's the scariest part. You know, most chess players enter an endgame thinking they've got everything under control, and then you see who's sitting opposite you right there, and you know the game has just started right now. Of course, not capturing any of those pawns. He does retreat with the knight, gets it forward right now. The bishop will move away. Magnus Carlsen still has that extra pawn. And because of that bishop on that top left corner for Esipenko, C5, that is a poison pawn. You cannot pick that up if you're Andrey.
Yeah, that pawn, it could become a very strong pass pawn, could become a target and a weakness still. But Andrey Esipenko, for now, is the bigger threat, is threatening to take off white's dark square bishop. Likely it'll move, Andrey Esipenko making a bit of a gesture there. Very expressive today, Esipenko. Maybe more even so than yesterday, where he was on the brink of elimination. He knows against Magnus this is the worst possible scenario to be in. It's still not terminal. White has an advantage for sure. Black still with great drawing chances, but Esipenko will need to be accurate for every single move till the end of the game now.
And that's the hardest thing to do, especially when you're facing the world #1. It almost feels like we're going to watch Magnus turn this endgame into liquid gold right now. He's up a pawn. Again, you can't capture that back just yet. Centralizes the bishop right now. So much activity is needed for Esipenko's pieces. The first thing, create some breathing space for your own king, or get your bishop out of the way with the black pieces.
Yeah, the most natural move would be to potentially push a pawn, but the black bishop was vulnerable, a bit of a loose square, so he parks it nicely in the center. Still back rank issues for black, so Magnus should be able to secure, cement his extra pawn within the next few moves. Can he hold on to it? The advantage is likely to grow if Magnus can find the right way forward here, but clocks are level. Still not easy. It all depends on the next few moves. Tanya, it could be black equalizing totally or white getting a decisive advantage in the next few moves.
It's always the latter that you're inclined towards when you see this guy on your screen, the Magnus touch in the end games. And right now, there are some plans that White has got. You could move your knight away for Magnus, offering more trades, or try to infiltrate with your rook towards that 7th rank. I still spot that A1 square, but Magnus has taken a decision right now instead to place that rook on C1.
Oh, and he's inviting some tactics. The evaluation bar dropped slightly. Can black recapture that pawn now? Restore the material balance. There's going to be pins. There's going to be some awkward tension. Esipenko probably wishes he had 30 minutes, not 3 minutes now on his clock. But bishop takes pawn on C5. That is the acid test of Magnus's last move. Is it refuted? Who knows? But Esipenko, if he doesn't play that, he's just going to be suffering long term.
That's the worst kind of position to be in chess. Is to just have this inevitability hanging in front of you of suffering without any activity. If he doesn't see a refutation, and I believe that has to be around the pin along the C line once the dust settles, he will go for bishop takes pawn. He needs to do it. This might be his last chance to neutralize the material deficit in this endgame.
Oh, big call now for Andrey Esipenko. I think he should risk it. I think just take that pawn and hope for the best. Ask Magnus to prove it. But he's burning his time. His heart rate has been rising a little bit over the last few moves. Does he go for it? Does he try and fight for equality? Or does he just keep the status quo?
You're looking at all these ideas. It starts looking pretty scary for Esipenko to go for that line. You take that pawn. White has got tactics in the air at the end of that. You need to make sure you're not losing that black knight at the end of it all, pinned down against that rook. And David, maybe we can just quickly show that bishop takes pawn is what we're watching for Andrey Esipenko. You take it, and maybe you just fall back with your bishop or your knight. And the idea is to hit with E4 eventually in this position, coming in with great firepower, and the balance is still there. But how easy is it to evaluate this as a human?
So difficult. The black rook is vulnerable, loose. You can never really move it. For example, if you try to get out of the way, your move, Tanya, boom, E4. And if the bishop were to capture, then again,
he goes for it.
Back rank checkmates. This is about to land on the board, this variation, at least in this direction. And Esipenko has better moves than this, better paths, but he's really living life on the edge now. And Magnus, he's the one who has to prove things. Evaluation bar says it's still holdable for black, but it's going to be a narrow path.
With 2 minutes, 20 seconds, it's definitely harder to be Esipenko right now. There are tactics coming up. Even though there are such few pieces left on the board, it's going to be a bit of a minefield. Although Magnus does pause. That usually happens when he spotted the defense for his opponent. I think we're going to see this being played out. Does he fall back with the bishop? Or is there another idea to get to that pin?
Oh, that's a great call. Falling back with the knight wouldn't actually grant an advantage, as there are some tactics at black's disposal there. So Magnus might need to find that tricky move, difficult one. We can see that the top computer move is to fall back with white's bishop, but it's mysterious, it looks slow, it's counterintuitive to retreat a piece back to its starting square. Magnus might need to find that to cause any problems, otherwise it might just immediately be equal.
And my question is, Magnus voluntarily gave back that pawn. So what was it that he saw in this position that would keep his chances alive? Because suddenly he's taken a pause. He doesn't like what he had initially found.
Yeah, he wanted to retreat his knight, but he didn't realize after a trade of bishops, if the white knight had moved out the way, white's king could not have recaptured. There would have been a black knight jumping out the way. It discovered check, and actually things would have turned around. But Magnus does find the best move. Andrey Esipenko now simply needs to give his black king some breathing space. Push a pawn, any pawn, or move the black king towards the center. You need to ensure there are no back rank checkmates in the near future.
And I'm going to tell you what Magnus's idea is. Get that knight out of the way and push that e-pawn forward, dislodging the bishop. Magnus needs one more move to come up with that deadly threat. He can't immediately do it because he'll have hanging pieces of his own right now. And look at that, Andrey Esipenko stops that e-pawn moving ahead forever, but it comes with a big cost.
Comes with a big cost. It gives away a big square. Given a question mark this last move, and that's because white's knight now can jump into the center, into the e5 square, making use of the fact the black knight is pinned, cannot move. The black rook is still vulnerable. That would control things completely and possibly gain material in the next few moves. Magnus likely to find it, I'm going to say. Knight into e5, played.
He's such a beast, Magnus Carlsen is. He's just so good at spotting all these ideas in an endgame, never misses his opportunity. Comes forward, you can't take it. The rook is hanging, and if not, the e-pawn about to step up, tripling down on that pin. You pin it, you win it.
Winning a rook for knight now would just be a decisive advantage for Magnus Carlsen. How does black stop the threat of the white pawn moving forward? I don't think you do. The black rook does retreat, but still on a loose square, still undefended. Given a question mark, mistakes come in pairs, they say, and Andrey Esipenko not able to find the accurate path. Deep time trouble now as well. 1 minute, Magnus working Magnus magic, defending his knight, creating squares for the white king to come forward, but he's just in full control. Black can barely move, totally frozen.
He's in flow state, is Magnus Carlsen right now. He's just played this flawlessly. He's made it look so easy from what appeared to be an equal in-control endgame for Esipenko. Big tactics, and Esipenko is about to go down in material right now. Is this the moment Magnus decides to lash out with the e-pawn? Look at it. It's like he's playing with his prey. He's toying with it right now. He's saying, I'm going to wait with that e-pawn. Not just yet. Suffer on.
Wow, that is the most sadistic move on the board. Just pushing a pawn. Magnus just continuing to push pawns. Now the white bishop has been unleashed. The black knight has been overpowered. Had to move out the way. It's an exchange gain here for Magnus. A rook for knight. He is totally winning now. Level number of pawns. Magnus was able to win material without giving a pawn as well in the process. The black knight has been cut off, can only jump back and get traded. Magnus now, cruise control. He wins these positions in his sleep normally. Andrey Esipenko needs a miracle.
And that is no ordinary exchange right there. It's not only the black knight that's been cut off for Esipenko. That king is never seeing light of day, will be stuck on that back rank, and Magnus keeps gaining more and more space. There is a threat on that g-pawn. How is Magnus planning to defend it?
Oh, a bit of a shake of the head. I think Magnus might have missed this last move. He has to give a different pawn to maintain his further advanced g-pawn. Now he cuts off the retreat of that black knight. A bit stranded, black's knight on the edge of the board. Knights on the rim are dim, as they say. Instead, Andrey Esipenko has to give up a central pawn as his bishop was a bit loose. And now the knight about to drop off. Andrey Esipenko resigns. Magnus strikes first blood.
No leaks in liquid today for Magnus Carlsen. What a flawless finish that was. Taking that pawn early on in the endgame, giving it back at the right moment, and then doing Magnus things as he usually does in that final phase of the game. And for Andrey Esipenko, he has to win on demand. Game number 2 to take it to Armageddon.
Tanya, it is crazy how many times Magnus Carlsen wins those types of positions. It looks equal. It was a symmetrical pawn structure. Equal pieces, equal everything, but Magnus just with the power of one pin, putting pressure on that pin piece, winning material, guiding it home to victory. Never really looked in doubt, despite the fact that Andrey Esipenko didn't make too many mistakes.